should be nearly at the sea floor. Telemetry looks good. Say 100 meters?
Sounds about right.
Good. Excited?
Yeah, I've seen all the footage, but I mean, it's different to be so close to her.
Ever done anything like this before?
Yeah, Bismarck as a grad student, and Lusitania on vacation a couple of years back.
Hell of a resume.
Alright, I've reached the seabed. Can't see much.
You're still a couple of 100 meters out, and back to manual control. Shall we run an equipment test?
That's alright. I'm good.
Okay, you'd better place a marker before we head too far. Interact with the button next to the map to place one. Interact with the button in front of the map
Marker's been
to place
placed.
a marker. You can head towards the bow. So, I had a call from our main sponsor.
Problem?
No, all fine. Just voicing her excitement about us finally diving. Said she's looking forward to seeing what we can do. I've set up a call for 8 p.m. this evening.
For $45,000 a day? Let's just hope we find something.
Never mind the money.
I should get my lights ready
doctorate
now
is
that I'm
riding
getting
on
close
this.
to the bow.
You can control the movement of the sub's lights by using the up, down, left and right buttons on your controller. To turn the spotlights on and off, interact with the button in front of the lever.
Whoa.
There's something you don't see every day.
She's a beauty.
Okay, first things first. We've got a contract with the Titanic Society to place their commemorative plaque on the forecastle deck. Get yourself into position.
Alright. Coming up to it now.
You'll need the Predator for this task.
Ah, the ROV.
Yep, courtesy of Flight Avionics and the latest in augmented reality technology. If you look up, you'll find a set of VR goggles and a control panel.
To deploy the ROV, hold down the L2 button and look at the VR goggles. Then press the cross button to use.
The controls to maneuver the Predator are the same as the submersible. Make your way over to the plaques already laying on the deck, and remember that the range is only up to 15 meters. The advantage of driving without an umbilical.
Is there any way to boost the signal?
Yeah, but we need to upgrade the deep-sea transmitter, and they don't come cheap. The generosity of our sponsors and UNS funding only goes so far. If we complete these contract jobs, we might just be able to afford some upgrades.
What happens if I go out of range?
The automatic recall kicks in. ROV comes straight back to the sub.
I'm here.
Great. The plaque we're placing is in the Predator's inventory. You can access it through the menu.
Oh, how do I open the menu?
You can open the menu by pressing and releasing the info button. While in the menu, you can check your map and mission log and access the inventory. To interact with items in the inventory, hold down the L2 button and use the right stick to highlight the item. Press the cross button to select.
Okay, I'll place the plaque down on top of the flashing beacon.
Women and children! This way! Women and children!
Head for that ship on the horizon. Transfer your passengers and tell their captain to come at once. We require urgent assistance.
Surely they can see our rockets, sir.
If they can, they are not responding. As quickly as you can.
Aye, aye, sir.
Quickly now! Women and children!
Quickly!
Women and children! This way! Women and children!
Head for that ship on the horizon. Transfer your passengers and tell their captain to come at once. We require urgent assistance.
Surely they can see our rockets, sir.
If they can, they are not responding. As quickly as you can.
Aye, aye, sir.
Quickly now! Women and children!
Quickly! The boats are leaving!
Daddy, where are we going?
Shh, love, we're going on a little adventure. We'll be back soon.
Over here. Let's try this one.
I'm afraid it's women and children only, sir.
Please, sir, can't you see my wife needs help with the children?
Sorry, sir. Captain's orders.
What's the meaning of this? Is this a drill?
Only a precaution, sir. Everyone will be back aboard in good time.
John, I can't manage without you. I need you.
We'll just have to for now.
But
Don't worry, Marie. I'll get on another boat. You go ahead with the children.
Daddy, I don't want to go without you.
John, I don't see any men boarding lifeboats.
I'm sure there's other boats further down letting men board. Right, David, help your mother and sister board.
Yes, Dad.
I'm sorry, sir. Women and children only.
For God's
He's
sake,
just
he's
a boy.
just a boy.
What age is he?
He's only 16.
He'll have to stay on board with the other men.
God's sake.
Do something, John.
Is there nothing you can do? My wife can't manage alone.
I'm afraid not, sir. Captain's orders.
Hey, the officers are letting the boys leave on the other side. You must hurry.
Thanks, Fran. Marie, take the baby. Look after Emily. We'll get on another boat. Emily, Daddy loves you very much. Be good for your mother and sister. We'll see you again soon.
Daddy, don't go. You have to come with us. We won't be able to find you.
Shush now, love. You're going on the boat with your mum and your sister. We'll be along shortly, I promise.
Daddy, I don't want to go.
Women and children.
Go straight to the next boat. Do what you must to get aboard. Do you understand?
I will, ma'am, I will. Don't worry.
Mind him, John.
Right, Emily. Time to go. Be brave.
No!
Here,
No,
let me
No,
help.
Daddy,
Emily, go.
please!
You have to
I
go
want
with
to
your mother.
you.
Go.
Please let me go with
No.
you. Dad,
You'll be all right. Be
please.
good, child. We'll see you soon.
We'll head straight for another boat.
Women and children, final call.
Right, it's time to go.
No!
She must be terrified. Oh, the poor thing.
No!
Ready to ropes.
Bye. Bye, Emily. Bye,
All
Marie.
away.
Daddy!
There, sweetheart. They'll be fine.
Thank you.
My daughter was the same growing up. Father's favorite.
Do you believe there's any real danger?
Oh, no, dear. I saw men locking the watertight doors as I left my cabin. I'm sure we will be back on board soon.
Hey, how do we get to the lifeboats? Hey, how do we get to the lifeboats?
Oh dear.
Do the steerage have their own boats?
I don't know. There should be boats in the third-class decks, but I haven't seen any.
Surely there must be extra boats kept elsewhere. Otherwise, how can all the passengers leave the ship?
That's why the sailors on the deck seemed almost unprepared when lowering this lifeboat.
And why our lifeboat has only 3 sailors.
Yes, this whole affair has been managed rather badly. I shall be making a complaint when we come aboard Titanic.
Help! I'm trapped! Help! Help!
Mommy, I'm scared.
Shh, it'll be fine.
Get ready to release the ropes.
Aye, aye, sir.
stand a chance up there.
Sit down then. You're lucky I haven't thrown you overboard.
Welcome to the Titanic VR guided tour. We are currently 3.8 kilometres below the surface of the North Atlantic and 100 metres east of the bow. This submersible is on autopilot. However, you can adjust your spotlight using the far left lever. Please keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. I'll provide you with information about locations as we pass them, so please sit back, relax and enjoy the ride. The RMS Titanic was the second White Star Line Olympic-class ocean liner, the first being RMS Olympic and the third being HMHS Britannic. She was 269 metres long, 28 metres wide and 72 metres tall from the bottom of her keel to the top of her masts. At 46,328 tonnes, she was the largest ship built at the time, being only slightly bigger than Olympic. Olympic and Titanic were the 400th and 401st hulls laid by shipbuilders Harland and Wolff in their Belfast shipyard in Northern Ireland. The two ships were built side by side, with work on the Olympic begun first. Everything on RMS Titanic was massive. This centre anchor was at the time the largest anchor forged by hand and weighed in at over 15 tonnes. The centre anchor and the two bower anchors were made by Noah Hingley and Sons in their workshop in Dudley, England. The anchors were transported to Belfast by horse, train and ship before being installed. It took 3 years to construct Titanic, but by the 2nd of April 1912, Titanic was completed and taken out to the Irish Sea for her trials. She was certified as seaworthy by the British Board of Trade and ready for her maiden voyage. She would be servicing the transatlantic route, a journey from Southampton, England to New York, USA, with stops at Cherbourg, France and Queenstown, Ireland. RMS Titanic carried mail and cargo as well as passengers. She had 6 cargo hatches with numbers 1, 2 and 3 forward and 4, 5 and 6 aft. On our left is the number 1 hatch, the access point for the forwardmost cargo hold. The hatch cover can be found lying about 100 metres in front of the bow. It was blown off this hatch when the bow impacted the ocean floor and the water inside was forced up and out of the ship. After departing Southampton on the afternoon of Wednesday the 10th of April, RMS Titanic began her 5,360 kilometres journey to New York City. She was due to arrive in the early hours of Wednesday the 17th of April, but with calm ocean conditions and good weather, it was possible she could arrive early on Tuesday evening instead. The night of the 14th of April was moonless and a light fog was developing on the horizon. Titanic's captain Edward Smith had received a number of ice warnings during the day and had changed their course so they were further south to avoid the affected areas. The captain retired to bed and First Officer William Murdoch took charge of the bridge as officer of the watch. Titanic steamed ahead through the night while lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee searched the horizon for small ice. They were standing here in the crow's nest when at 11:40 p.m. Fleet spotted an iceberg directly ahead. He rang the warning bell 3 times to indicate an obstacle ahead and phoned the bridge. Murdoch gave the order, hard a starboard, and the ship turned to port, but it was too late. Titanic struck the iceberg on her starboard side. The impact buckled hull plates and sheared rivets, revealing her 6 compartments to the ocean. You can see here the remains of the crow's nest platform and the mounting bracket for the bell above the access hole. The bell and telephone can be found lying in the debris field. The lookouts would climb up a ladder on the inside of this mast to reach the crow's nest. Both Lee and Fleet didn't believe Titanic had struck the iceberg hard and thought it was just a close shave. They didn't realise the seriousness of the situation until they arrived on the boat deck and were ordered into lifeboats. We are now heading down the number 2 hatch to reach the main cargo hold and mail room. We're passing by decks D, E, F and G, which housed the third-class open space and cabins for third-class single men and crew. Third-class single women and families were accommodated in the stern. The D-deck open space was a large sheltered area with bench seats, small tables and a bar. Steerage passengers used this space to walk, socialise and to listen to music. They were expected to create their own entertainment, and some passengers brought their instruments with them on the journey. The third-class passengers held a dance party here on the night of the sinking. The crew staying in this section were mostly firemen, trimmers and greasers. These crewmen worked in the hot and dirty boiler and engine rooms, shovelling coal and greasing machinery. Because of this, they had their own special wash areas and slept in rooms away from passengers. They accessed their work areas through a passageway under the cargo hold below. Titanic contained 15 bulkheads, thick walls that separate her lower decks into 16 watertight compartments. It was a new design technique that meant Titanic could stay afloat with up to 4 of her compartments damaged, and led to her being considered unsinkable. Unfortunately, the collision with the iceberg opened 6 compartments. Within the first 15 minutes, this cargo hold was underwater, and the third-class accommodation on G-deck above was starting to fill with water. This hold was used to store cargo for passengers and businesses being transported across the Atlantic. Among the crates of fabrics, furniture and food products, there were also a few unusual items, including orchids, dragon's blood, barrels of mercury and a brand new Renault automobile. Some of the more expensive items being carried included Egyptian artefacts heading for the Denver Museum, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam and the Le Circassiano Ben painting by Blondel. These items were most likely held in the first-class baggage area next door, but were lost along with the mailroom when that section filled with water 20 minutes after the collision. We are now going to head through to the mailroom on the other side of this bulkhead. RMS Titanic was registered as a Royal Mail steamer and contracted to transport mail across the Atlantic. RMS liners were favourable with passengers as they were considered more reliable to arrive at their destination on time. Titanic had a mailroom and post office on board, with 5 dedicated post office workers. This team consisted of 2 British and 3 American clerks, and together they sorted up to 60,000 letters per day. John Jago Smith and James Williamson were from the British Royal Mail, and William Gwynne, John March and Oscar Woody were from the US Postal Service. They worked in both this room and the sorting room upstairs, and their sleeping quarters can be found above on F deck. There were roughly 200 bags of registered mail and 3,500 standard mail bags on board, meaning a total of roughly 7 million pieces of mail and 700 parcels were lost in the sinking. The iceberg damage ran directly across the starboard side of this room, leading to this space flooding early in the night. The 5 clerks worked tirelessly to try and save the mail, and managed to carry 200 mail bags up these stairs to the sorting room. Only a few minutes later, the water had reached this level, and they moved what they could to D-deck. Their final movements aren't known, and sadly, all 5 mail clerks died in the sinking. As the iceberg slid down the side of the ship, Murdoch ordered a hard aport, swinging Titanic's stern out of the path of the iceberg. He also closed the watertight doors, isolating the flooding to those damaged compartments. The forward 3 hatches, along with the peak tank and boiler rooms 5 and 6, were breached. The openings were long and thin, where the iron plating had separated and exposed a total area of little over 1 metre squared. After the collision, RMS Titanic stopped and almost immediately took a starboard list. The captain organised a group to go below and inspect the ship for damage. When they returned, Chief designer Thomas Andrews was summoned to the bridge and given the damage report. The Titanic would sink within 60 to 90 minutes. The captain gave the order for the lifeboats to be prepared. Passengers who were woken by the impact were starting to make their way onto the decks. Many found large chunks of ice here on the forward well deck and shaved ice falling through open portholes on sea deck. Third-class men had an impromptu football match, and first-class passengers joked about keeping pieces of ice as souvenirs for the journey. While exciting, passengers didn't believe they were in any danger, and most returned to their cabins soon after. We're now moving up lifeboats, 4 more than required by the regulations outlined by the British Board of Trade. There were 14 respective purser's office, and they were given maps of the ship. This office was also the first point of call if first-class passengers wished to send telegraph messages using the new wireless technology on board. Chief Purser Hugh McElroy was well known among the first-class passengers and crew, having served on White Star liners for 13 years. He often dined alongside passengers in the restaurant. During the cross-channel journey, McElroy kept a canary in his cabin, minding it during its delivery to a friend in Cherbourg. On the night of the accident, he was seen assisting with loading and lowering Lifeboat 9. He helped women enter the boat and spoke with owner Bruce Ismay. He was also seen on deck speaking with Assistant Purser Reginald Barker and surgeons William O'Loughlin and John Simpson. The friends were standing silently watching the last boats being lowered and spoke briefly with Officer Lightoller before shaking hands and saying their goodbyes. The sitting room, one of the most recognisable on board Titanic, was part of a parlour suite occupied by the Strausses. It was decorated in the Regency style with mahogany furniture and gilt panels. It was the only room on board in this style, and you can still see the golden clock sitting on the mantelpiece surrounded by debris. The bedroom next door also contained mahogany furniture, this time contrasting with the white gilt panelling and decorated in the Empire style. Isidore Strauss was one of the owners of Macy's department store, and he and his wife Ida were returning home to the United States after visiting Europe for the winter. Their adult son Jesse was travelling with his young family from New York towards Europe on board the liner SS America, and their ships crossed paths in the afternoon of the 14th of April. Isidore sent a short message to Jesse that afternoon, noting the fine weather they had experienced. Unfortunately, Jesse wouldn't learn of his parents' fate until some 4 days later. The elderly couple were woken by the slight bump as Titanic struck the iceberg, and made their way up onto the deck after waking their maid and valet. When the time came for Ida to board Lifeboat 8, she entered the lifeboat but then realised her husband would have to stay on board, and she stepped back out. Isidore and others tried to convince her to re-enter the boat, but she refused to leave without her husband. Ida helped their maid Ellen Bird into the boat and wrapped her fur coat around Ellen, saying she wouldn't be needing it anymore. Isidore and Ida were last seen sitting in deck chairs on the A-deck promenade holding hands. Isidore's body was recovered from the ocean, but Ida's was never found. The Strausses' parlour suite was just one of many specially designed first-class rooms. The 77 large staterooms were decorated in a range of different period styles. Titanic was designed to be the height of opulence, and the first-class common areas were the most luxurious. She mostly followed Olympic's design, but White Star Line made many changes to Titanic's layout and fixtures due to feedback from Olympic's maiden voyage. Some design changes can be seen on D-deck. Green cushions and potted palms completed the look, keeping the space open. The first-class saloon. Percy Fletcher, the ship's bugler, called passengers to their evening meals by playing the Old Roast Beef of England at various locations around the ship. First-class passengers boarded and departed the ship via the gangway doors on either side of this room, or by the gangway doors directly above on B deck. These lobbies were larger on Olympic and extended out into the reception area. During Olympic's maiden voyage, White Star officials noticed crowding in the reception area each night after dinner and decided to extend the reception area on Titanic. They also redesigned the small reception area near the B-deck restaurant to split the crowd and added additional seating in both areas. These 3 elevators serviced only the first-class passengers and ran from A-deck to E-deck. A 4th elevator was available off the second-class staircase and was the first elevator to be available for second class on any White Star liner. As no photographs exist of Titanic's forward grand staircase or elevators, it was assumed they were exact copies of those found on Olympic. It wasn't until film director James Cameron explored this area with an ROV that it was discovered the intricate design of their grilles is different to that on Olympic. Not a lot of sea life lives at this depth, but since discovering the wreck we've learned quite a bit about the ones that do. So far, 24 species of invertebrates have been discovered around the wreck, including crabs, coral and sea stars. There have also been 4 species of fish found, with the rat-tail or grenadier fish being one of the more common species. They can grow up to 1 metre long and can be found both inside and outside the wreck. E-deck was also known as the upper deck and provided accommodation for first, second and third class passengers as well as most of the crew. An access corridor used by both crew and steerage ran almost the length of the ship on the port side, just behind this door. Named Scotland Road by the crew after the busy street in Liverpool, the 2.6 metre wide corridor allowed passengers to make their way to and from the dining saloons on F deck and crew to reach their quarters. This side of the door was strictly first class only, and running down the starboard side were 45 staterooms. These rooms were alternative first or second class and were therefore not as luxurious as those on the decks above, but still comfortable. Many contained mahogany furniture with white enamel brass beds. This stateroom was occupied by Margaret Brown, a wealthy American activist and philanthropist. She was heavily involved in workers' and women's rights and campaigned to support those less fortunate both before and after the accident. Margaret was holidaying in Egypt with friends when she received a message that her eldest grandson was seriously sick at home in the United States. She booked the earliest ship from Cherbourg back to New York, the RMS Titanic. In her interview with Colonel Archibald Gracie, she stated she was lying on her brass bed reading at the time of the accident. She felt the bump, but didn't think much of it and kept reading. It wasn't until she heard men talking about heading up on deck that she decided to find out what happened. One of the men told her to grab her lifebelt and head up onto the boat deck with them. As they made their way up, she saw a group of men manually lowering the F-deck watertight doors from the access points in the floor here, directly outside of her cabin on E-deck. The men were joking around as they worked, so she thought it must only be precautionary. Margaret helped women board lifeboats on the port side of the ship before being persuaded to join Lifeboat 6. She noticed her lifeboat was lacking rowers and organised people to take an oar. She tried to convince the passengers of her lifeboat to head back to the wreck and save those swimming, but was met with This was the cooling room, and first-class passengers would relax here after using the temperate, hot and steam rooms just off the side door. Passengers would change into towels using the change rooms in the starboard corner and store any valuables in the cabinet next to the vestibule. The passenger would then make their way down to the temperate room, where they would sit or lay in the heat for 10 to 15 minutes. Here they would start to sweat before moving into the adjoining hot room. After spending another 5 to 10 minutes in the hot room, the passenger would either take a cold shower or a dip in the swimming bath next door, before making their way into the shampooing room. Here the passenger would lay on a marble table while an attendant gave them a full body wash and massage. Once dry and wrapped in clean towels, the passenger would make their way back to the cooling room, where they would relax until their body returned to the normal temperature. The Turkish baths is one of the best preserved areas on the ship, with most of the tiles, ceiling lanterns and wooden panelling still in place. The deep location within the wreck leaves it protected from destructive currents, although there is still sea life down here. The rust icicles, or rusticles, hanging from the ceiling are created by iron-eating bacteria. They come in different shapes and are incredibly fragile, disintegrating when touched. Along with the bacteria, fungi, shells, sand, clay and coal can be found within the rusticles. Scientists have been collecting samples to determine the different strains of bacteria living on the ship, and their research has been used to preserve oil and gas pipelines and safely dispose of old ships and oil rigs. As first-class passengers rose up this staircase and made their way out onto the boat deck, they would have passed the band playing in this alcove next to the entrance. The band consisted of 8 musicians led by violinist Wallace Hartley. They usually played separately as a quintet and string trio at varying locations throughout the day. During the evacuation, the musicians began playing near the B-deck restaurant, before later moving up to this position near the forward grand staircase. They played mostly ragtime tunes to calm passengers standing nearby and draw passengers inside up to the boat deck. Some survivors state that the band played until the end and that the night was so quiet, even those in lifeboats away from the ship could hear the music. Many survivors claim that the hymn "Nearer My God to Thee" was the last song played, although it was also reported to be "Songed Autumna." Sadly, all 8 members died during the sinking, with only 3 remains recovered by the cable ship Mackay Bennett. Wallace Hartley was one of them, found with his violin inside his case and strapped to his body. The violin was an engagement gift from his fiancée, and it was returned to her following his death. Memorial monuments have been erected around the world to honour those who died at their posts as Titanic sank. The musicians playing on deck, the passengers who loaded lifeboats and then stood aside, the firemen and engineers keeping the dynamos running. The boilers standing here are part of Boiler Room 2 and were running until the end, powering the dynamos in the stern. A skeleton crew remained in the electrical engine room, redirecting power and keeping the lights on. This is the point where the keel failed and the massive ship began to tear itself apart. As so much of the ship between the bow and stern sections is scattered in the debris field, it's difficult to piece together the last moments of Titanic. Even those watching it happen couldn't agree, with the inquiries held in both the United States and England producing contradicting accounts. Many expositions to find and raise the wreck were proposed over the years, with the exact location of her wreck being unknown. Titanic's coordinates sent out in distress on the night of the accident had been incorrect. On 1st of September 1985, a Canadian-French team were searching the area when Dr. Robert Ballard came across some small debris. He followed the trail which led him to a boiler and eventually the wreck. His discovery confirmed suspicions that Titanic had in fact split, and there was no hope of raising the wreck as a whole. Scientists and historians have long argued for and against the recovery of artefacts from the site, while agreeing the site should be treated as a mass grave. Although it's predicted Titanic's wreck will disintegrate within the next 20 years, her story will intrigue generations to come.